Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a stack of challenging, rigorous source material articles, research, foundational texts, and really we try to extract the critical knowledge you need.
Exactly. Our whole mission is to transform you from just a curious observer into someone who is, strategically informed. And we do it in one focused conversation.
And today we are undertaking a particularly fascinating deep dive. This one was requested by Sachin Karnik, who is a presenter and researcher with the Angel Wing, LLC.
And this topic, it's maybe one of the most universally misunderstood concepts we have ever tackled. The word is acceptance.
Right. When you hear that word, you immediately think of
Right.
retreat, giving up.
Yeah, a passive state, or even like an emotional surrender. But the sources we have today, they just fundamentally challenge that entire notion.
So we're going to try to reposition acceptance, redefine it.
Completely. We're arguing it's not a feeling of resignation, but a razor-sharp, essential tool of strategic advantage and real mental discipline.
Absolutely. The title for this deep dive is Active Alignment, Redefining Acceptance as a Strategic Tool. And I think our mission really is to rigorously analyze this central premise from the text.
Which is?
That acceptance is, at its core, an act of epistemic honesty,
Why?
of precision of perception. It's not optional. It's the non-negotiable foundation for any effective action.
And that's the key. The text just hammers this point home again and again. True acceptance is about achieving absolute accuracy about what's really going on.
Accuracy, that's the word that keeps jumping out.
It's the key differentiator. Think about it. If you're operating based on inaccurate data, or even worse, data that you've sort of psychologically filtered to match what you want to be true,
Then your whole strategy is built on sand.
it collapses. So we really need to spend some time here, clearly defining each term and especially separating the discipline of acceptance from the feeling of, say, approval.
Okay, and then show why that distinction is so critical in these high-stakes scenarios, whether it's in your personal life or, professionally.
Yes. We need to demonstrate that this idea, active alignment, isn't just a nice to have. It's a structural necessity for any kind of intelligent thought.
I see. Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with part one, where we have to really rigorously define this strategic tool and debunk all the traps people fall into. So the first stumbling block for most people, I think, is that they just confuse acceptance with something else entirely. The sources are very clear on this.
Yes, they highlight two critical distinctions we have to make right away.
Okay, let's start with the big one. The difference between acceptance and approval.
Yeah.
Or, just liking something.
This is the classic confusion. It's almost universal. And the framework we're discussing today says that separating these two things is like the very first step toward mental maturity.
So break that down. What's the mechanical difference?
Acceptance is purely an act of perception. That's it. It's just allowing reality to register fully. It's the truthful, objective recognition that, X is happening right now.
No emotion attached.
Not yet. Approval, or liking, is the emotional judgment that you apply after the fact has registered. It's your preference. It's the voice that says, I wish X was happening, or I really wish X wasn't happening.
Okay, so an example. Let's say I get an unwelcome letter from the IRS, an audit notice.
Perfect.
Acceptance is just me reading the letter and recognizing the fact an audit is scheduled for next month. Full stop.
Right.
Approval would be me saying, oh, wonderful. I am just thrilled the government is going to scrutinize my accounts and completely interrupt my workflow.
Which is, of course, ridiculous. No one feels that. But we merge the two, don't we? We believe that if we accept the fact of the audit, we're somehow saying we're okay with it, that we approve of it.
And that's what creates all the internal resistance.
Massive psychological resistance. Because when your mind refuses to accept a negative fact, it's usually because it's afraid that acceptance equals endorsement. But it doesn't.
So the text says acceptance is descriptive.
Exactly. Acceptance is descriptive, approval is preferential, and if a strategic operator can't keep those two separate, they start applying these emotional filters to objective facts. They just waste time and energy internally trying to negotiate with a fact that has already happened.
That's a fascinating way to put it.
Yeah.
You're literally trying to negotiate with reality. You're arguing with the weather or with last quarter sales numbers or the fact that a deadline was missed.
Yes. And what is the psychological cost of doing that? of constantly blurring that line between what's a description and what's a preference.
This would be huge.
The source calls it perceptual warping. If you are unwilling to register a fact simply because you don't like it, you contaminate your entire input system.
So give me an example of that.
Okay, imagine a CEO. He's personally attached to a product idea he came up with. He loves it, but the product is failing in the market.
The sales data is clear.
The sales data is clear, but his dislike, his non-approval of that failure translates into denial, non-acceptance of the data. His subsequent strategy sessions are all based on a fantasy of success, not the reality of the market.
So the whole system becomes unstable.
Fatally unstable,
Yeah.
because the input data is polluted by his preference.
Wow. Okay. That makes perfect sense. Acceptance is the prerequisite for any kind of objective analysis, no matter how unpleasant the thing you're analyzing is.
Exactly.
All right, let's tackle the second major misconception then. Confusing acceptance with resignation, with giving up.
Right. This is the idea that active alignment just means being passive or withdrawing, and our sources just vehemently refute this. They define acceptance as the beginning of an intelligent response,
Never the end.
never the end of the interaction. Resignation is an external act. It's stopping your effort. It's putting down the tools and walking away from the problem.
Whereas active alignment is...
It's an internal act. It's picking up the tools, but first, making absolutely sure you can see the problem clearly.
So if I accept that a major competitor has just launched a better product, am I just stopping the fight? A lot of people would fear that, right?
Yeah.
That admitting that reality will drain their motivation to even try.
But structurally, the opposite is true. Resignation comes from despair. It's the feeling that any action is futile. Acceptance, on the other hand, comes from clarity. It's the recognition that your next action has to be different and better.
Okay, so if you refuse to accept the competitor's superior product...
You're in denial. You just keep pushing your old, faulty strategy.
Yeah.
But if you accept the reality of it, you immediately free up all these cognitive resources to analyze their innovation, to find their weaknesses, to formulate a new reality-based strategy to counterattack.
So that moment of acceptance is like a strategic pause, a stabilization.
Yes. It prevents that reflexive, unintelligent reaction that's born from panic, and it replaces it with a deliberate, informed, and precise response.
I really like that framing. It's the difference between just, blindly thrashing around and making a purposeful movement.
Right. Without that pause, we're just reacting to our own internal resistance, our frustration that things aren't easy, instead of responding strategically to the reality itself.
And the sources draw a very sharp line here. They call out two sort of sophisticated forms of denial that active alignment specifically avoids.
Yes. Spiritual bypass and psychological retreat. These are high-level defense mechanisms.
How are they different from just simple denial?
Well, simple denial is just, this isn't happening. Spiritual bypass is way more insidious. It's when you use spiritual or Zen principles to pretend that a painful reality doesn't affect you.
Ah, so you're avoiding the actual emotional and psychological work you need to do to process it.
You're avoiding the lived experience. You're using intellectual ideas to sidestep the messy reality. It's not true acceptance. It's just pretending to be enlightened to avoid feeling necessary pain.
Masking pain with a narrative of virtue.
Perfectly put. And psychological retreat is similar, but it's more about evasion. It's refusing to look at the pain points, the traumatic memories, the objective business failures, because the discomfort is just too great.
And active alignment demands the opposite.
It demands that you fully register the pain, the difficulty, the objective conditions without trying to mute them or pretend they're irrelevant. It requires genuine courage.
This all leads us to the core definition. This isn't just a nice idea. It's a technical requirement. And the term the text uses is epistemic honesty. Why such a formal term?
Well, epistemic relates to knowledge, right? To knowing and how we acquire it. So epistemic honesty is about intellectual and perceptual integrity.
The willingness to know the truth of a situation.
Before you try to influence it or change it. It frames acceptance as a foundational requirement for any system that wants to learn and adapt. If your foundation of knowledge is corrupted by dishonesty, even self-deception, the whole structure is compromised.
So acceptance is literally accuracy. It's the rigorous discipline of letting raw, unedited data, the facts, the sensory input, and the true conditions, enter your mind without any immediate filtering or modification. It's input validation.
The ultimate act of input validation, and that brings us to the intentional act of perception. The sources really emphasize that acceptance is deliberate, accurate seeing. It's meeting reality exactly as it is.
And to do that, you have to avoid three key distortions that just ruin perception.
Yes. And this is where most people fail.
So what's the first one?
The first is just distortion or perceptual warping. This is when your fear, your bias, your desire, it physically alters the way you see a fact. For example, you get constructive criticism and you instantly hear it as a personal attack on your character, not as data about your performance.
Right, you're applying a negative filter to what might be neutral information.
The second distortion is embellishment, adding a narrative or a fantasy. This is when your mind takes a raw fact and immediately wraps it in this complex, often self-defeating story. A minor setback happens. Your flight is delayed. Embellishment is instantly thinking, of course this happened. This always happens to me. The universe is against me.
When the only acceptance required is.
The flight is delayed by 2 hours. The rest is just emotional noise that consumes all the energy you need for problem solving.
And the third distortion.
Premature interpretation. Meaning making. This is slapping a conclusion or a judgment onto a fact instantly. A colleague doesn't answer your email right away.
And the premature interpretation is, they're angry at me, they're trying to sabotage the project.
Exactly. When active alignment demands, we pause and just state the fact. The email has been unanswered for 4 hours. We have to resist that urge to assign a cause or blame immediately.
That distinction between perception and interpretation is so crucial. We're meaning-making creatures. We want to complete the story right away.
But active alignment says, stop, just see the raw objective fact first.
And that mental discipline leads directly to what the text calls the foundational sequence for any intelligent response.
Yes. It's a 3-step process, and the order is completely non-negotiable.
Okay, step 1. Reality occurs. An objective event happens. A market shifts, you discover a fact, you feel a physical sensation.
Step 2. Acceptance. This is the mirror phase, the moment of mental discipline. You allow that reality to register fully in your awareness, holding it there like a flat, clean mirror. You just acknowledge it exists without reacting. It's the stabilization phase.
And then crucially, step 3, reaction or judgment.
Only now do you apply your preference, deciding if you like it or dislike it, or choose your strategy, deciding what to do about it. The power is in that delay.
So acceptance has to come before preference, before resistance, before justification, before strategy.
If you bypass it, your reaction is rooted in a distorted perception. This sequence is why the text emphasizes the golden rule. Acceptance is not the end of the interaction. It is the necessary beginning of an intelligent response. You have to stabilize your perception, then you can act intelligently.
This really does shift acceptance from a soft concept to a hard requirement, which is exactly what we need for this deep dive.
Okay, so to really make this concept stick, the sources give us 3 really powerful analogies. And what they do is shift active alignment from this, abstract psychological idea into a mechanical necessity. They show why clarity is utility.
That's a great way to put it. Clarity as utility. Okay, so let's start with the first one, the dirty windshield.
So imagine you are in a critical, high-speed situation. You're driving on a dangerous, winding road, and suddenly your visibility is compromised. Mud, dirt, something gets smeared all across the glass.
Right, and the non-acceptance response is to just keep driving, right, while wishing the mud wasn't there.
Exactly. You increase your effort, you drive faster, you lean closer to the glass, but you're basing all your maneuvers on a fantasy of what the road might look like, or trying to see through one tiny, distorted patch of clean glass.
It's just blind movement.
It's blind movement. All your energy is spent resisting the existence of the dirt instead of dealing with the consequence of the dirt. And psychologically, this is exactly what happens when we face a financial loss or a public critique, or we make a big error.
We just speed up, we work longer hours, we defend ourselves more aggressively, but we're still blind to the core facts of the situation because we refuse to accept the problem even exists.
You're allocating massive resources to a scenario you can't actually see.
So in that case, active acceptance is the strategic pause. It means pulling over immediately, stopping the car and taking the time to clean the glass.
And cleaning the glass doesn't fix the pothole up ahead. It doesn't change the fact that it's raining.
No, but it restores your ability to navigate the environment as it actually is.
The lesson is so direct. Action without acceptance is blind movement. The cleaning of the glass, that intentional, rigorous moment of alignment, is the strategic prerequisite that restores your perceptual clarity. It's an investment of time that pays off in accuracy and safety.
You can't successfully manage conditions you refuse to see. You're trading a little bit of forward momentum for structural safety.
That's a perfect summary of acceptance as utility. Now let's look at integrity, which is the requirement highlighted in the second analogy, the scientist's data.
Okay, so this takes that idea of epistemic honesty and makes it a formal procedure.
Yes. Any rigorous intellectual endeavor, especially science, demands allegiance to raw data above your personal preference. The core requirement is collecting data exactly as the instruments report it before any analysis or interpretation.
So the psychological parallel here, the non-acceptance, is the scientist who has invested years, maybe their whole career, in a hypothesis.
And the experiment yields contradictory results.
And so they start to cherry pick the data, or misrepresent it, or even falsify it because they so desperately want their theory to be true. They're imposing their agenda onto reality.
And the consequence of that non-acceptance is fatal to the entire enterprise. They ruin the experiment. They introduce a lie at the foundational level.
So they might get the fleeting emotional comfort of being right.
But the model they build is based on a delusion. The text really emphasizes this point. You cannot solve a problem, whether it's curing a disease or building a business, if you introduce lies, even lies of self-deception, about the core variables.
This speaks directly to the integrity of the whole system. So active acceptance is the scientist recording the data exactly as the instruments show it, even if those results completely disprove their pet theory or invalidate years of hard work.
The allegiance has to be to the truth, to the raw data, over the personal comfort of the ego. This is so important because it shows that intellectual honesty, which is what acceptance is the only path to long-term success.
It's like if you hide a minor flaw in the foundation now.
You end up building a multi-million-dollar structure on a compromised foundation that's doomed to fail. Acceptance is epistemic honesty before interpretation. Before you decide what the data means, you first have to register what the data is.
That lesson is so critical in business too. In corporate environments where people hide bad news from management, or where management refuses to accept evidence that contradicts a huge investment they made.
Exactly. They are essentially falsifying their own internal data. They prioritize maintaining a preferred story that the investment was smart over confronting the hard facts of the market. And that just guarantees they'll keep pouring resources into a failed venture.
Okay, our final analogy is about fidelity, the mirror.
Right. This one differentiates between a funhouse mirror and a clean, flat mirror. It's all about the quality of the reflection.
So the non-acceptance state is the funhouse mirror. It takes reality, the event, the fact, the person, and it immediately distorts it. It adds a layer of commentary or judgment or dramatic warping.
And psychologically, this is what happens when we react defensively. We add an immediate judgment like, this is impossible, or this disaster proves I'm a complete failure. The funhouse mirror takes your image and imposes a story onto it.
Whereas active acceptance functions like the clean, flat mirror.
Right. It performs an active role in fidelity. It accurately receives the information and reflects the image, but it's completely passive in judgment.
So it doesn't criticize what it reflects. It doesn't try to correct the light, and it doesn't comment on whether the reflection is good or bad.
It just shows what is there.
So the lesson here is that acceptance reflects reality accurately before the meaning-making part of our brain kicks in. It establishes the objective baseline. It doesn't add to or subtract from the situation, which means you're always starting your strategy from solid factual grounds.
It gives you the clear, uncorrupted input needed for an intelligent response.
Okay, so we've established the mechanism. We have these great analogies. Now we need to see its practical utility.
Exactly. We need to move to the high-stakes human scenarios that the text provides, because this is where the strategic advantage of active alignment becomes, frankly, undeniable. It saves your internal energy, and it enables effective external action right when you're in a crisis.
Let's start with what might be the ultimate test. Example A. The medical diagnosis. High stakes. I mean, this is where the facts are intensely personal, unwelcome, and often terrifying.
The scenario is receiving confirmation of a serious, unwelcome fact, a diagnosis of a chronic or even a life-threatening illness. The natural defensive human response is just to resist.
And that's the distorted reaction. It's denial. They must have the wrong chart. This can't be true. Or it's emotional catastrophizing. This means my life is over.
And the critical point here is the massive cost of that distorted reaction. When you're in denial or catastrophic thinking, you're not actually engaging with the disease. You are consuming all your psychological energy arguing with the existence of the disease itself.
That internal resistance is a huge energy sink.
It's neurologically taxing. Your fear response hijacks your entire system. The fight or flight mechanism gets activated because your mind perceives the fact of the diagnosis as an immediate threat rather than as a piece of information.
And that paralyzes the prefrontal cortex, right?
Yeah.
The part of your brain that does all the planning and problem solving.
It literally prevents you from strategizing because your brain is too busy trying to fight the truth.
So active acceptance is the anchor in this storm. The patient views the diagnosis as a data point. A horrific one, maybe, but still a data point.
They allow the diagnosis to register accurately before the panic or despair takes over. They acknowledge the reality of the illness without endorsing it or liking it. They move instantly to, okay, this is the situation I now face.
And the strategic result of that is immediate. It's clarity and resource management.
Because 100% of their energy isn't being wasted fighting the reality of the illness. That energy is immediately available to manage the illness.
So they can start engaging with the treatment plan, researching specialists, making necessary lifestyle changes.
Exactly. Acceptance stabilizes the subject so that effective action can begin. Denial just guarantees that every choice you make after that will be contaminated by your desire to pretend the problem isn't real.
So in this case, acceptance is an act of self-preservation. It restores your brain's ability to plan even under incredible duress.
Precisely. And if we look at example B, the parent and the introverted child, relational, we see how non-acceptance can destroy attunement in our relationships. A very different kind of high stake.
So the scenario here is a clash between expectations and reality. You have an extroverted, assertive parent who really values outward performance.
And their child is the opposite. Naturally shy, sensitive, deeply introverted, a slow-to-warm-up kind of temperament.
The conflict starts because the parent isn't really interacting with their actual child.
No, they're interacting with a fantasy child, the expectation they've imposed on the child. The distorted reaction here is projection. The parent sees the child's sensitivity or shyness as a defect that needs to be fixed or pushed out of them.
They're in denial about the child's fundamental nature.
Yes, they're applying a strategy designed for an aggressive, extroverted personality to a gentle, introverted one. It's like trying to fix a delicate watch with a hammer. And this resistance makes the child feel fundamentally misunderstood, constantly criticized. It just damages their self-esteem and the whole parent-child bond.
So what does active acceptance look like here? It requires profound mental discipline from the parent, I imagine.
It does. They have to drop the narrative of how my child should be and engage in accurate observation of who my child is. And this isn't passive, it's active perception. It's observing the child's actual needs, their pacing, their triggers.
And the strategic result is revolutionary for the relationship.
It moves from high friction to active alignment. The parent stops forcing the child into an unnatural mold and starts guiding them based on their actual strengths. The guidance shifts from you need to be louder and tougher to how can we create environments where your unique sensitivity is actually a strength?
It becomes reality-based relating.
Yes, and the core takeaway from this example is so insightful. You cannot love or guide someone you refuse to see clearly. Acceptance restores that relational attunement by replacing projection with clear perception.
That is a powerful application. It shows acceptance is key to empathy, not just solo strategy. Okay, finally, let's analyze example C, the failed startup, professional. This really highlights how active alignment helps us manage our ego and allows for professional growth.
Business failure is one of the highest threats to our identity, right? The scenario is a collapse. A major product launch gets canceled, or the business just runs out of cash.
And the distorted reaction is what the text calls identity-based condemnation. The founder equates the business failure with their own personal inadequacy and spirals into this paralyzing shame.
Or they do the opposite. They externalize all the blame. They blame the market, the investors, specific employees, anything to avoid looking at the financial facts, because the facts challenge their ego's story of being competent or wise.
And that denial creates a fatal inertia, doesn't it?
Completely. If the founder blames bad luck, they never analyze the mistakes in their cash flow projections or the fundamental flaw in their distribution model. They stay stuck in the very delusion that keeps them failing, the delusion that they were right and the world was wrong.
You can't extract the lesson if you refuse to admit the test failed.
Exactly. So active acceptance demands courage from the founder. They have to look cleanly at the objective facts, the final bank balance, the hard market data, the customer retention numbers.
The internal iteration is brutal, but necessary. The model did not work. Our assumptions about customer acquisition were incorrect.
You face the failure without immediate justification or self-deception, and the strategic result is immediate freedom. By acknowledging the failure without the distorting influence of the ego, the founder achieves what the text calls necessary lesson extraction.
They learn the lesson without becoming the lesson.
Perfectly said. They can strategically isolate whether it was the pricing or the personnel or the timing that was the accurate, non-negotiable fact of failure. And then they are free to strategically pivot to the next venture without carrying the weight of past denial.
So acceptance precedes growth by preventing the delusion that keeps people stuck in these recurring failure patterns.
Okay, so the power of this whole philosophy, for me, is cemented by the fact that it's validated not just as a psychological insight, but as a structural requirement in fields from neuroscience all the way to engineering.
Right. This moves acceptance from just being a virtue to being a biological and mechanical necessity.
Exactly. Let's start with the hard science, neuroscience and prediction error. Your brain is fundamentally a prediction engine. It's constantly running these complex models to anticipate the next moment based on all of its accumulated past data.
Okay, and what happens when those models fail?
When reality deviates from that anticipation, when the sensory input is different from what was predicted, the brain generates what's called a prediction error.
And this is the moment where learning can happen.
But only if the system handles that error correctly. And the integrity of the brain's entire neural model hinges on one thing. It must accept the error. The raw, contradictory data has to be integrated.
So if the brain denies the error, if it says, no, my prediction was right, the input must be wrong, that's what leads to delusion.
Inexorably, the system just continues to operate on faulty premises. So acceptance functions like the update command in software. It insists that reality be registered before any psychological updating, which is just learning and adaptation can occur.
If I deny the reality of the prediction error, I stop learning. My model of the world becomes obsolete and eventually dangerous.
That's the perfect parallel. And this isn't just a metaphor. This process involves specific neurological functions. When a prediction error happens, areas like the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus basalis are crucial for processing that novelty or that error signal.
So conscious acceptance is the discipline of letting that biological signal pass through without our defensive filters getting in the way.
Exactly. It's the neurological requirement for learning and for synaptic plasticity. It ensures our internal map stays current with the external terrain.
That really does make acceptance a survival mechanism, not a luxury. Okay, let's turn to philosophy now, specifically phenomenology and description versus explanation.
Right, so phenomenology, broadly speaking, studies the structures of consciousness and experience as they appear to us from a first-person view. And a core principle of that method is that an experience must first be described
Meaning, what is happening in meticulous detail?
before it is explained, meaning why it is happening or what its cause is.
And how does acceptance fit into that philosophical framework?
Acceptance is the psychological discipline of pure description. It is the practice of allowing phenomena to just appear without slapping a premature conceptual overlay of analysis or judgment on top of it.
So if I'm sitting here and it starts raining,
Acceptance is describing the reality. The window pane is vibrating, the temperature has dropped, I hear a consistent drumming sound. The explanation: this rain is caused by a low-pressure system moving off the coast. That comes later.
but the untrained mind instantly jumps to explanation or meaning. Oh, it's raining, that ruins my weekend, or I knew I should have brought my umbrella.
Yes. Acceptance enforces that necessary pause for pure observation. It's phenomenological honesty applied inwardly. It gives reality the space and the silence to simply be before our analytical mind imposes a story onto it.
You have to accurately acknowledge the existence and shape of the event before you can hope to understand its cause or its consequence.
Exactly. And finally, the most mechanical validation comes from systems engineering and input integrity. We're talking about the iron rule of computation. Garbage in, garbage out, GI go.
The ego is an absolute principle, right?
Absolutely. Any sophisticated system, doesn't matter how powerful its processor is, it will produce a flawed output if it receives flawed input. The human strategic mind is the processing unit, and acceptance is the sensor calibration.
So if the human mind acts like a faulty sensor, if it distorts data based on fear or preference, which is non-acceptance, then the strategy unit is just going to output a disaster.
Precisely. If a sensor feeds a computer false data, say, it reports the temperature is 70 degrees when it's actually 30. The sophisticated computer will correctly calculate how much air conditioning to apply, which will cause the system to freeze.
The problem isn't the algorithm. The problem is the denial built into the input.
So acceptance ensures accurate, undistorted input data. The stability of the whole system relies entirely on the quality of the incoming data. Acceptance stabilizes the human system by correcting the input, by demanding truth, not by trying to force a preferred output.
You stop arguing with the calculation, you just make sure the numbers being calculated are correct.
And that proves acceptance is the essential first step in data integrity before any strategy or control can be applied.
Okay, so we've established that acceptance is necessary, it's strategic, and it's structurally validated. Now let's try to synthesize all of these insights into a final philosophy of mental discipline. We need to really emphasize the active strategic nature of active alignment.
Right. And the sources outline a very clear summary framework for this. The 3 stages of an intelligent response. This is what operationalizes acceptance. It transforms it from an abstract insight into a practical application.
Okay, so stage 1 is the pause.
The moment something unexpected or unwelcome happens, the immediate instruction is to just stop. All internal and external activity. Achieve stillness. The mental command is, do not judge yet. Do not react yet.
So you're interrupting that reflexive emotional defensive system. You're creating a little gap in time.
Exactly. And in that gap comes stage 2, the alignment. This is the active core of the process. This is where you apply epistemic honesty. You let the reality register cleanly, fully, and without any filtering.
And the internal affirmation is that anchoring statement. This is what is happening, not what I wanted, not what I expected, but what is here right now.
You stand where reality stands, and only then can you move to stage 3, the response. Only from that firm ground of truth that you established in stage 2 can you move intelligently.
And your strategic response is then anchored in fact, not in fantasy, which maximizes your probability of success because you're addressing the true variables of the situation.
Exactly. And we should really dedicate some time here to the power that you derive from this framework. Specifically, how active alignment fundamentally restores agency and frees energy. Because this is probably the greatest strategic advantage.
Let's start with energy management.
Okay. Resistance is psychologically exhausting. When we engage in denial or justification or blame, we're consuming a massive amount of psychological energy, just arguing with reality. We're fighting the existence of a fact that has already occurred.
And that's a battle you can't win. The wasted resources must be staggering.
It's all tied up in these internal defense mechanisms. It's a fight not against the problem itself, but against the truth of the problem.
So how does acceptance change that?
Acceptance acts like an immediate psychological circuit breaker. It instantly frees up all that trapped energy. That resource is no longer dedicated to internal defense, to denial or justification or fantasy, and it becomes immediately available to respond to the situation.
It shifts your brain from a desperate defensive posture to an expansive problem-solving one.
Yes, the mind stops demanding that reality be different in order to cope, and that results in a huge psychic stabilization.
Okay, second, this idea of restored agency. This is counterintuitive for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
They equate acceptance with being passive.
Mm-hmm.
They fear that accepting a difficult fact means they're giving up their ability to change it.
But the sources argue the exact opposite. Acceptance doesn't weaken your agency. It restores your true choice.
How so?
Well, if your decision is based on a preferred delusion, say you're insisting the market is healthy when all the data shows a recession, your agency is illusory. You're just acting out the script of your own wishful thinking.
But when you accept the facts?
You regain true agency because your choice of action is now based on the actual landscape. You have the power of true calibration. You can choose the most effective path forward because you know where you're actually standing.
So the active alignment itself, then, requires great courage and discipline.
Immense courage. What looks like passivity or surrender to an outsider is often the greatest feat of internal discipline imaginable.
It's the courage to stand where reality actually is, especially when that reality is harsh or painful or humiliating.
It's the refusal to distort what is happening. It's choosing intellectual and emotional integrity over momentary comfort. And that discipline is the ultimate statement on what mental power really is.
So the mind is powerful not when it controls reality.
But when it stops misrepresenting it.
Let's try to synthesize these final powerful insights then.
Okay, first, acceptance is perception without an agenda. And because of that, it is perception with power. You aren't trying to force a preferred outcome. You're simply integrating valid data. And valid data is the only prerequisite for a winning strategy.
Second, Acceptance is the difference between reacting to a story, the self-serving or fear-based narratives we slap onto an event, and responding to a situation, the objective facts.
And finally, nothing intelligent or effective or truly adaptive can be done with reality until reality is first allowed to be true. Active alignment is the commitment to that truth, and accuracy is the foundation of wisdom.
We've covered a massive amount of ground here. We've redefined acceptance as a tool of strategic accuracy, we've separated it rigorously from approval and resignation, and we've shown how this precision of perception stabilizes decision-making in high-stakes environments.
And it's validated by everything from systems engineering to neuroscience.
It's a demanding practice, this mental discipline. That initial, quiet act of just letting reality be seen without interference, no matter what the cost.
But that act is the beginning of accuracy, and accuracy is the foundation of wisdom.
So, to close, let's consider this final provocative thought for you to carry forward. You cannot orient yourself in a world you refuse to look at clearly. Think about how many decisions you make day to day that are based on the world you wish was there versus the world that actually is. The challenge of active alignment is to choose the latter every single time.
Thank you for requesting this deep dive and for sharing this highly valuable material with us.
For more information on this work, please contact Sachin Karnik at the email address provided in the description box.